Okay, welcome everybody. This is going to be a really interesting program. Bob Seidenschwartz joining us in studio from the Montana World Affairs Council. How you doing, Bob?
Good morning. Good to be back.
All right. I understand that we do have guests on the phone we're going to be visiting with this morning. And so would you like to introduce the first one, perhaps?
I believe we've got Imam Abbas. Are you on the phone with us, joining us from Bozeman this morning, Imam?
This is Eliyahu McLean,
McLean
from Jerusalem,
welcome.
and I'm here with Imam Albaz. Yes.
Well, welcome, and you're in Bozeman as we speak. Is that correct?
Yes, we're in Bozeman.
Well,
that is correct.
You don't quite have the history of the Montana background here, but we will welcome you being in Bozeman. You'll learn a little bit more about that when you come to Missoula tonight.
I'm sure it's not as heated as Israel-Palestine.
You know what? I'm willing to bet you're probably right on that.
Okay.
Well, welcome to the show. We've got Peter and John here. So Peter's going to do a little bit of just introduction about the Abrahamic reunion. And, of course, you're going to be speaking tonight at the University of Montana in the ballroom from 7 to 9 o'clock. So, Peter, if you want to do a little introduction for our audience.
Now, if you wouldn't mind, we have two lines with individuals. So we have Daniel. Daniel, are you on the line as well?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, let me make sure I've got your phone up there. Say hello, Daniel.
Hello. How are you doing?
There you go. Now we've got you. So we have Daniel and we have Khalil Albaz. Is that right?
Assalamu alaikum. Khalil Albaz is right.
Okay. All right. Allow me to do the best I can to try to introduce you because this is the Abrahamic reunion. These are the peacemakers. Religion is a force for peace in the Holy Land. And let's see, Rodef Shalom Eliyahu McLean is husband and father of 3 girls, an Orthodox Jew, originally from the U.S., now living in Jerusalem. He's a coordinator of the Abrahamic Reunion group of religious leaders and director of the Jerusalem Peacemakers. Also joining us this morning is, I believe, Khalil Albaz, the Imam of the Central Mosque and spokesperson for the Bedouin Town and Regional Council of Tel Sheva. He's a frequent commentator on Bedouin and Islamic affairs in the Israeli and Arab media. His commitment to peace and justice have led him to participate in regular interfaith meetings throughout the Holy Land. He took part in the annual Bearing Witness retreat in Auschwitz as well. So I hope I got everybody. So whom did I miss?
You also missed that Khalil's wife, Sana Albaz, is here. She's a Bedouin Muslim woman leader and educator.
Wonderful. I have her right here. I didn't realize she was here. My apologies. It says here she's a leader among Bedouin Muslim women in Israel. She has won numerous awards for her work in early childhood education among Bedouin youth. The educational center she founded in her town of Tel Sheva has served as a model for disadvantaged youth throughout the Bedouin sector of Israel. So we have lots of folks on the phone, and we have lots to talk about here this morning. So, Bob, if you would...
And a little procedural point.
Yes.
Khalil and Sana speak a little bit of English. They speak Hebrew and Arabic, so at certain moments, I will help translate your question.
Wonderful.
And help translate their response to English.
Fantastic. That's great.
Thank you, and welcome to all. I'd like to start with, of course, it shouldn't be news to anybody about the issues regarding the Israel, the Palestinians. So can you give us a little background in terms of how this organization came to be and how you came to come together as a group with these different religious and social political backgrounds? So if you would, please.
Certainly. So I don't know if you know, happening this weekend, starting tomorrow evening, or Friday, yes, tomorrow evening is an event called the Parliament of the World's Religions in Salt Lake City. So we're actually part of a larger delegation of Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Druze, men and women peace leaders from the Holy Land. About 12 or 13 of us will be gathering for 5 days this weekend in Salt Lake City for this once every 6 years Parliament of World's Religions. So back in 2004, there was a group of supporters from the center in Florida called the Rising Tide International that gave us a grant and brought a group of us to an earlier Parliament event in Barcelona, Spain, called the Parliament of the World's Religions. It happened there. And the Abrahamic reunion had been a separate group of religious leaders and peacemakers in the Holy Land who, some of them knew each other, but they weren't coming together as an organized force to reclaim religion as a force for peace. So we first gathered in 2004, and ever since then, my role as coordinator, together with a Muslim co-director named Sheikh Ghassan Manassa, we've been coordinating annual interfaith Ramadan dinner gatherings. And often these Ramadan dinner gatherings of 200 or 300 people in the Holy Land would gather people from all the different faiths in times of tensions even in the Holy Land to show that religion and religious people shouldn't be the instigator of conflict and hatred and violence across the borders, but actually the opposite, the source and the foundation of potential solutions that these secular politicians and Western political leaders always overlook.
Now, Daniel, if you wouldn't mind, I have here in my hand the Abrahamic Faith's Covenant for Peacemaking. Would you mind if I went ahead and read this so folks kind of have a little bit of a background? Would that be all right? It says, as Jewish, Christian, and Muslim people, we find common ground in our common origin. We are followers of Abraham, committed to the human family, and therefore adhere to a common core of ethical standards. We shall pursue friendship, peace, and justice. We will speak out against all forms of prejudice, hatred, and discrimination. We shall stand for the religious pluralism and mutual understanding that undergird the resilience of America. As people of faith, we enter into sacred covenant with a pledge to, number 1, pursue courageous friendships that bridge cultural divides. 2, weave our lives and institutions into the fabric of safety and security, protecting all from intimidation, threats, or war within community and country. 3, speak and participate in public life, guided by prayer, reflection, and experience. We bring our faithfulness to the public square to preserve religious pluralism, engendering peace in the 21st century. And number 4, to shun passivity for creative and responsible imagination for the future and well-being of all peoples. So does that accurately portray what you folks are trying to accomplish?
Daniel?
Yes.
Yes, it definitely accurately portrays. I just want to mention that Daniel Akle is a reverend in Bethlehem, and he also has a profile. Did you receive that also?
Let me find it here. Daniel's, yes, here it is. The Reverend Daniel Akla is an Arab-Palestinian Christian peacemaker from Bethlehem. He's a leader in Israeli-Palestinian initiatives and active with the Jerusalem Hug and Visit Palestine. Daniel leads worship and preaches at the Salt and Light Agape Ministries, an independent church that provides humanitarian support in a community struggling with high unemployment. Salam runs the House of Peace Guest House in Bethlehem. Daniel works at the Bethlehem Bible College as the support officer, web manager, tutor, student liaison officer, and Arabic English translator. So there we go. All right.
Okay, we got us all in there.
Thank you so much.
So let's talk a little bit about within Israel. We here in the United States, we get the public presentation of the issues. And as an example, right now there is a lot of tension in terms of the Temple Mount. There have been a number of attacks on Israelis recently. There's the re-energizing of some of the issues that had somewhat subdued earlier. So how do you work within the framework?
Several individuals joining us from the Abrahamic reunion over there, actually in Bozeman right now. So, John or Bob, would you please restate real quickly your question?
I will do my best not to fumble over myself on this time.
Go ahead.
At the current time, there's a great deal of tension in regards to the Temple Mount. You've got Muslims who are standing guard 24 hours a day. You can't bring prayer books. You can't bring, indications of other than Islamic type of worship to the Temple Mount. This has been an issue historically. So what, as an organization, how do you speak to those Muslim leaders who are taking a position, and at this point I have to say quite aggressively, in terms of their defense of the Temple Mount? So how do you approach that as an organization?
First of all, I want to say that Abrahamic Reunion doesn't actually take a specific stand on the question of status quo on the Temple Mount. we work in parallel to try to build relationships and trust between Israelis and Palestinians, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Druze. And we have members of our circle of religious leaders. We have a West Bank settler rabbi, and we have Palestinians who have, and Israelis who have even different views about the issue of the Temple Mount. But I would say none of us would say that the status quo on the Temple Mount should be changed. The status quo is that Jews and Christians can visit as tourists, but actually Jewish religious law forbids many people of faith on the more ultra-Orthodox side will not even visit the Temple Mount because they're aware of the tensions. Certainly there is a right, understandably, a right for Jews and Christians to want to pray on the Temple Mount. But right now things are so sensitive, and I think human life is very important, that we shouldn't provoke the situation anymore. So changing the status quo means that you don't have, on the one hand, establishment of a synagogue or a church up on the Temple Mount. On the other hand, you shouldn't have Palestinian rioters camping out in Al-Aqsa Mosque and preparing rocks to throw at Jewish worshippers either. There should be a calming of the situation. And so I think we would all agree to keep the situation calm is the wisest move on all sides. And the Imam wants to say something. He'll speak in Hebrew and I'll translate.
السلام عليكم. דבר ראשון, לפי ההלכה היהודית, אסור לא רק להתפלל בהר הבית על היהודים, אסור לעלות להר הבית. אולם כמה קיצונים מהימין היהודי הם שואלים את זה כפרובוקציה.
So he'll say, according to Jewish religious law, and of course I want to add that there is differences of opinion, obviously, within the Jewish religious community, but according to mainstream Jewish religious law, it's forbidden even to go up on the Temple Mount, not just to visit it, but there are some religious extremists who take advantage of the openness to visit and take things one step further.
ואז הימין עם הפוליטיקאים שנכשלו בלעשות שלום, הפכו את זה שלנו ולא שלכם, וככה נוצר הסכסוך.
So the Imam feels that the religious rights in Israel politicized the issue of the Temple Mount, that there wasn't a success in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and the Temple Mount has become an issue of division between the people.
Now, may I ask, this is Peter, does it sounds like from the Imam's answer that he views some people as deliberately trying to provoke a response by doing things that would not help promote peace. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's what he's saying. And I would add, from my point of view, that there are extremists on both sides. I think there are some, and I personally know some of the Jewish hardliners who are insisting and actually will go up with appearing to visit as a tourist, and then all of a sudden just start scream and at the top of their lungs and to pray in a provocative way that's going to get Muslims worked up. And I know that there are Muslim extremists in Hamas and Islamic Jihad who are also making up lies that the Israeli government is intentionally trying to take over Al-Aqsa, and there's all kinds of incitement on that side also. So this has become a very, very hot and heated issue. But I would add that the prophets of the Bible, the book of Isaiah, says that my house will become a house of prayer for all people. And if we believe that the third temple, for example, should be rebuilt, is not something that should come about by force, to force your right to pray or to force something. That dialogue, interfaith dialogue and cooperation and understanding on a deeper level, and the work that we're doing, I believe, is what will help bring Messiah, whether it's the first coming or the second coming or the Mahdi, as the Muslims believe. There could be the fire and brimstone model of death and destruction, or the other, perhaps, path, which is interfaith harmony, understanding, reconciliation, healing of the wounded Abrahamic family. And that's what we do. That's our work. So we're actually not directly involved in the debate on the Temple Mount issue, but certainly we as religious faith leaders have to pick up the pieces when there have been violence to try to help our communities on both sides to come back together and rebuild from scratch the goodwill and trust that's been built up over the years. We have a lot of work ahead of us.
There's so much going on. Now, John, you had a quick question before the break.
Yeah, I wanted to know if the Abrahamic Reunion Group worked together on any civic policy.
Certainly, we do try to affect policies that lead to fear and separation and ignorance of the other community. We also promote individual religious leaders to do social welfare projects within their own faith community to lift up the disadvantage in their community, and that disadvantage and ignorance is what lead people to extremism. And also, the Imam and his wife are very much active in promoting the integration of the Bedouin Arab Muslim community within the state of Israel. Their family serves in the Israeli army and in national service, but they find that there's a lot of discrimination in funding by the central state organs in the infrastructure for the Bedouin community in the Negev. So they're very much involved in promoting policy that promotes integration rather than exclusion of the Bedouin Arab Muslim community in the Negev region especially.
In the next minute and a half before we take our break, can you tell me if you see any concrete results from the Abrahamic reunion? Are you seeing a change in attitudes and a change in especially the way people behave toward each other in that very strife-torn area of the world?
كل شيء نحن רוצים تعبدا ونحن מבחינים בשינוי באים הפוליטיקאים והורסים את זה. ואז אנחנו אומרים להם, אתם נכשלתם, זוזו הצידה, תנו לנו לנסות, אנחנו לנסות לפחות, לנסות לעשות משהו בנושא הזה.
So he's saying that we've been doing work for years, and he finds that the politicians, on both sides, it's not a matter of just blaming one or the other, come along and cause the advances that we've done over many years to fail. He calls on the politicians, now stand a step aside, let us fill the void, and we will work to rebuild from the ashes of destruction the cooperation and faith and harmony. And I want to add, we have a very strong circle and family of hundreds of people, Arabs and Jews, Israelis and Palestinians, who have taken part in our events over years. And this core circle of several hundred people are not affected in a negative way by anything that's happening. That we have a very, very strong, I would say even a family, an Abrahamic reunion family, Jewish, Christians, Muslims, and Druze, that the bond is very, very strong.
Wonderful.
And that core family continues to work together in spite of all of the recent conflict and to try to calm the situation.
But we have a question on our Facebook page for you folks.
Yes, Katie, who's been listening, wants to know. She's curious as to what specifically the lady and these gentlemen would recommend as an avenue of action to confront and defeat ISIS.
Yes, the Imam would like to answer.
Go right ahead. Yes, please.
السلام عليكم. للتصاري عرب داعش زي تصور شلم عرب إذا معرب يرتسي شي داعش يعلم داعش لا يغفق بعماد شبوع يميم أما عرب رتسي شي داعش يمشيخ لحقود بهم هم يكوبوا فنحن نكيز هم يكيزوا تدام بمزرعة تيخون أز داعش يشير.
He's saying, it pains me to say this, but that the Islamic State is partially a creation of Western policy, and if the Western world really wants Daesh meaning Islamic State, to disappear, they could implement policies to help them with their downfall. And if they don't do enough concerted, united action to make that happen, then they will stay around for the foreseeable future.
And what policies would he recommend?
המערב צריך לתמוך באסלאם המתון, וברגע שמאפשרים את הכוח, כשמערב רצה להוריד סדאם, הוריד את סדאם. כשמערב לא רצה להוריד את אסד, אסד לא יורד. עכשיו אם הם רוצים להוריד את דאעש, יורידו דאעש.
Yes, if the West, for example, if when they wanted to take down Saddam Hussein, they took down Saddam Hussein. If they didn't want to take down Hafiz al-Assad, then they didn't. If they want to, the Imam was suggesting that moderate Islam is largely overlooked, and the moderate Muslims receive no funding, no support, no backing from any avenue. He's saying empower the moderates.
And how do we find them? That's the issue that our country is dealing with in Syria right now.
Yes. Well, I can certainly say in the Holy Land, if you just, any politician listening, any member of Congress, just send us an email. We'll come over, we'll introduce you to the moderates. Those are the people that we're working with, not only the Abrahamic Reunion, but a wider circle of moderates in Egypt, in Jordan, in the Holy Land. Syria is more complicated because you have Shiites, you have Alawites, you have Sunnis, and you have the result of destructive policies as a leftover from the colonial era, where minorities were put in power by the French and by the British, and you have a lot of colonial history that I would say is directly contributed to the big mess that's going on in Syria right now.
Allow me to say that this program has had significant contact with our new Senator Steve Daines. We have a new Congressman, Ryan Zinke. We also have pretty good relations with our senior Senator, John Tester, and the former Senator, Max Baucus, who's now the ambassador to China. And we would be certainly thrilled to pass along your contact information to them so that they can do exactly what you suggest and contact you.
Yes. We are in direct contact with the religious moderates in the Islamic world. And I find that even in Israel, we give most of the airplay to the extremists. They get all the news coverage. They get all the publicity. All you have to do is, spill a little blood. Where it bleeds, it leads. And I'm begging, sometimes I speak directly to the media outlets, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN. I personally call the bureau chiefs of Jerusalem when we're doing events that bring together the moderates and the peacemakers in the Holy Land, and they say, "Well, sorry, we can't show up. There's, if there's a suicide bomb there, or if there's an attack, or by one extremist or another, then we'll bother to come. But until then, it's really not news." And I've heard this specifically from bureau chiefs in the Holy Land. They really not interested, and I find that a depressing reality. So you, the consumer of media, also needs to pressure your media outlets to cover the positive stories, cover stories of hope that inspire people, that lift people up, because that negative media coverage, in fact, feeds in where the extremists feel the more extreme actions they take, the more they can get publicity for their cause. So they love it.
Okay,
that's
Bob,
what they thrive on.
Okay, hold on. Bob, go ahead.
I just want to kind of reinforce what you're saying, that on the show yesterday, we spoke with one of our guests, Dr. Mirdad Kier from the University of Montana. So we do attempt to bring voices to give voice to what you just described. In fact, next week, Imam Feisal, Abdul Rauf, is going to be here in Missoula.
Wonderful.
He's the head of the Cordoba Initiative. He was the imam in the mosque in New York City right after 9/11. He will be here in Missoula, and he will speak to this issue of building relations between Islam and the West and giving voice to the moderates that you're describing. So, it's interesting that you come from Israel with your group. We're here in Missoula, and we have the opportunity to be able to bring people of dialogue together to have these type of conversations. So to reinforce what you're doing, it's happening here too, and we're all on the air discussing this right now.
I guess as a person of faith myself, whose church has been at odds with other realms of the church in the past, it seems to me that a lot of the reform that's needed often has to come from the inside. We had theological debates in my tradition over the two swords theology, and we won't go into that right now, but my question is basically this. Is there anything that the faith community can do within itself, outside of Western governments and the media, to reform what seems to me to be a bad seed in aspects of the faith in the Middle East?
I think each of our faiths, I certainly do the work in Jerusalem within Orthodox Judaism. We have a lot of work to do within our own community. Daniel, you want to speak to the work among Christians?
Yeah, sure. Well, I work in the Bethlehem Bible College, and we, as Palestinian Christians, we host a conference called Christ at the Checkpoint. It happens once every 2 years in Bethlehem that brings international speakers as well. And we try to look at the current conflict and on all that from a biblical Christian through Christ's eyes. We try to examine that against, we filter all the theology through Jesus Christ and the cross, and we try to take practical things towards what is happening for the unjustful acts that is happening against the people of Palestine. So you can check
and Halil, the Imam, would like to say something.
Oh, go ahead.
כל הזמן מדברים, אתם לוקחים את זה רחוק מאוד, מדברים על דאעש, מדברים על מקומות אחרים, דברו עלינו, תגידו לנו מה התוכניות שלנו, מה אנחנו הולכים לעשות.
He's saying, I mean, we kind of feel you guys are getting a bit off track by asking us about Islamic State. You know, we are the leading religious peacemakers in the ground in the Holy Land. Ask us what it is that we actually do.
My question wasn't about Islamic State. That was a question from earlier.
Yeah.
Obviously, unless you're saying there's no violence in Jerusalem.
There's plenty of violence in Jerusalem.
Okay,
That's,
so there are aspects,
yes.
there are troublesome aspects of the faith in your home city. And that's what I was addressing.
Yeah.
אתם, הממשל האמריקאי תורם כמעט לישראל בכל שנה סכום של 10 מיליארד דולר לסיוע צבאי, לסיוע דברים כאלו. אנחנו בעמותה שלנו רוצים להוציא עיתון קטן, לפרסם את זה על הפעילות שלנו משם. אין לנו את הכסף לעשות את זה. יתנו לנו 10% מהסכום הזה. אתה משלם המסים אמריקאי, תן לי 10% מהסכום הזה, ותראה כמה אני עושה. על הבית שיש לי רשת רדיו גם מה שיש לך עכשיו.
He said that the military aid, not just to Israel, but also in the Middle East, you know, is hundreds of millions of dollars. We're asked even for 1/10 of 1% that goes to military aid in the Middle East to empower to projects that we're doing. If we could have, you know, a tiny amount of that funding, we could open up our own radio station like you have in Missoula to publicize also our work within the Holy Land and also in the larger world.
אנחנו רוצים לנצל את הבמה שאנחנו בשידור חי במזולה, ורוצים הערב שהאזרח האמריקאי יפתח את הלב שלו ואת הכיס שלו, ובשנה הבאה תשאלו אותנו אותם שאלות ונגיד לכם בדיוק מה עשינו ומה עשינו ולאן התקדמנו.
He said he would like the wider community in Missoula to come tonight to hear us, and that this talk tonight and our being on the radio by next year, if we ever come again, that you will all know what is it that we're doing, that we won't be just some little obscure group in the Holy Land, that our work to build interfaith harmony, trust, reconciliation on the ground between the wounded family of Abraham will have a lot more airplay.
So this question, I'd like to bring Sana into the conversation. So Sana, salam alaikum. I'd like to ask you, I think the woman's voice and role is underreported, but extremely significant in this process. Could you give some voice to what you're doing as a woman, reaching out across to Jews, to Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, as a woman, and give some insight as to what you are doing, please?
Good morning, salam alaikum. אני בתור אישה, בתור אישה שגם שיש לה זכות בחירה במדינת ישראל, ואני רואה שהפוליטיקאים שלי כשלו, הבטיחו לי לעשות שלום בתור אישה ובתור אימא שתגדל ילדים שיהיה להם עתיד טוב, ראיתי שהם כשלו, אז אני הצטרפתי לעמותה של בני אברהם על מנת שנעשה שלום ונוכל לקדם משהו עבור כל העתיד של כל ילדינו, גם אזרחים ישראלים וגם פלסטינאים.
So she's saying as a woman and as a mother and a Bedouin Muslim woman, she also has seen how the politicians and the political process has failed us on all sides, and she has stepped up her role to be involved in the Abrahamic Reunion Project to bring specifically the women of faith, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, together in cooperation.
This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. And I asked a question for Sana before the break as to her as a woman and her perspective. There seems to have been, again, from our perspective in the West, we hear how much women have been oppressed and kept down and not allowed to express themselves. How is she overcoming or working through that in the work that she's doing with your organization?
Especially as a Bedouin woman.
Yes, as a Bedouin woman.
אדוני הנכבד, אני חושבת שיש לך תמונה מוטעית, כמו שכל המערב רוצה שתהיה לו תמונה מוטעית כלפי האישה המוסלמית וכלפי האישה הבדואית. עצם העובדה...
כן, you said, I want to let you know, I think that the Western world has a mistaken image about the Muslim woman and specifically the Bedouin Muslim women, and I would like to correct.
Please do. Yes, please do.
המערב בנה לעצמו תמונה כלפי האישה וננעל על התמונה הזאת, אבל עצם העובדה, דבר ראשון שאני נמצאת כאן באמריקה כאישה בדואית ומוסלמית עם מטפחת על הראש, זה אחד הדברים הגדולים שמעיד על התקדמות האישה המוסלמית.
She's coming as a personal example here to America with a religious Muslim women dress and with a hijab on her head to provide a personal example representing the Bedouin Muslim community and the women of her community.
האסלאם האמיתי שאתם באמת לא מכירים, לא כמו חלילה האסלאם של הדאעש וכל הארגונים האלה, נתן לאישה המוסלמית המון זכויות. מתוך הזכויות האלה בחירת בעל העתיד ואקדמיה והשכלה ולימודים ובחירת כל מה שהיא רוצה בחיים. יש לה זכות מלאה.
She's saying that the true and authentic Islam actually gives women full and unfettered rights for education, for employment, for השכלה,
אקדמיה, לימודים ובחירת בעל העתיד וכל מה שהיא רוצה בחיים.
And freedom of choice for direction that she wants to take for herself and her family.
ואפילו בהחלטות יותר גדולות על מרחב של גם פוליטיקה וגם פעילות חברתית, וכל ההחלטות האלה גם יש לה זכות בהחלטות.
She has a right to be part of decisions even in the political realm, even in the financial realm.
ואני יכולה לתת לו דוגמה קטנה במגזר הבדואי שאני באה ממנו, שזה מגזר מאוד יחסית עדיין נעול. האישה פרצה דרך מאוד מאוד גדולה, האישה הבדואית.
She's saying that, for an example, in her particular community, the Bedouin Muslim community, there have recently been amazing advances for the rights of the women in that particular community.
70% מהנשים הבדואיות נמצאות במכללות, באקדמיות, בקריירה, מפתחות קריירה.
Yes, 70% of Muslim Bedouin women are in academic institutions, institutions of learning of different degrees.
I'll tell you what, we are about 3 minutes away from having to let you folks go. So I would love if maybe the people who are there could give just a quick final statement as to what you're doing in Bozeman and perhaps what you hope to accomplish while you're here in Montana.
So we're in Bozeman, and we're actually going to be driving today to Missoula. So we're, first of all, just taking a bit of a breather and from the tensions of the Holy Land to enjoy the great big sky state of Montana. And we hope tonight, when we come to speak at the university in Missoula, that we can bring more specific examples of the work that we're doing to bridge the divides in the Holy Land and hope to provide a positive example of interfaith cooperation that could be a model for you here in the United States and you here in Montana as well.
How long will you be staying in this country?
We are after Missoula tonight. Tomorrow we'll be driving back to Salt Lake City. So we're actually taking part in the Parliament of the World's Religions until next Monday, and most of us will fly back Monday. Khalil and San are actually continuing to the San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, and the Bay Area for a number of talks and presentations out in California. I have a wife and 3 little girls and daughters in Jerusalem, and the neighborhood I live in is where some of these recent terrorist attacks have happening. So it's the moment I'm done with my obligations here on the country next Tuesday, I'm on the first plane back to be with my family in Jerusalem.
So just a reminder to the audience that the Peacemakers will be here in Missoula tonight from 7 to 9 o'clock in the UC Ballroom. So all of those who are interested, we encourage you to come out and meet and dialogue directly with this group. Thank you so very much for taking the time. Enjoy our beautiful Montana, and
Thank you.
welcome.
I just want to
Thank you very much. Thank you.
want to tell you all what an absolute privilege this has been. I mean, this is so unusual that we get a chance to get a glimpse into what, quite literally, how another part of the world lives, and we really appreciate you being willing to share that with us.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. Daniel?
Yes, we are really glad to be here, and we just want the whole world to see how different groups in Palestine and Israel, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Druze, Baha'is, we're all trying to work together to create a different reality on the ground, create and work for peace and justice.
Wow, that was absolutely a mind-blowing experience, just finishing that up. Bob Seidenshort's with us, John King here, and now we are transitioning to a gentleman who's visiting with us, Imam Feisal Abdul Rauf, who is not a stranger to Talk Back. He's been on the show before, a year or so ago. Imam Feisal, it's good to talk with you again, sir.
It's good to talk with you, too. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well,
again.
Our pleasure, and very importantly, Missoula, pay attention. We have coming from New York, Imam Feisal is going to be in Missoula on the 21st of October. So we have an opportunity and the privilege of hosting him here right in Montana. That'll be at 7:30 at the Doubletree. So the Imam will be speaking. We will have the opportunity to dialogue. So in the realm of what we're doing right here in little old Missoula, Montana, it's a rare and privileged opportunity that we have to host people of such distinction. So welcome to Missoula, sir.
Thank you so much, Bob. You are so kind.
I'd like to start our conversation. We have just a half hour. So could you please give us some insight from your personal experience? What happened that was either a moment in time or based on your experience that led you to start the Cordoba Initiative?
It was 9/11 that precipitated it. I have lived in different parts of the world and have lived in the United States since 1965 when I came as a lad of 17. And it was the mid '60s and the Vietnam War. It was the sexual revolution, the drugs on campus. It was a very revolutionary time, and I was at Columbia University, where SDS was singing songs of revolution, trying to bring down the Johnson administration. So, for a person coming from the Middle East and growing up and having grown up in Southeast Asia, all that was very new and very alien and very strange to me. But after having lived in the United States for 50 years, after finding my faith in religion in America, and having worked in the interfaith area, trying to improve relationships between the faith traditions, the major faith traditions especially, 9/11 was a turning point, both in the history between America and the so-called Muslim world, meaning not only the majority, 57 Muslim countries of the world, but also many other countries and Muslim populations, including those in the West. It created a different. It was the seminal point of a moment in time where Islam became seen in the West as a national security threat and had to be contended with. And many friends of mine, mainly American friends and predominantly non-Muslim friends, said we have to do something to improve the relationship between the United States and the world of Islam, as we say it, and sought my thoughts on how that could be done. So I spent the better part of a year, and with the help of the ex-mayor of Aspen, whom I had met in 2002, we formulated and we launched the Cordoba Initiative as an algorithm as a formula to bring about a rapprochement between the United States in particular and the West in general with the so-called Muslim world. That's a very long elevator speech, but that's the moment in time.
Go ahead, John.
This is a very different day for me, but you're the second Imam that I've spoken with today. And the other Imam that was on our show earlier, I asked him a question, and it had to do with reforming the faith. When it comes to the issue of violence, of aggressive jihad, of incidents all over the world, we know about these. The media talks about them regularly. My question was, how do we reform that aspect of Islam? And I asked him if there was something inside the faith that could do that. I feel like he kind of dodged my question because he responded with Western policy and where America spends its money. But I will give you the same shot. What sort of things can be done within Islam to reform what seems like some bad seeds?
Well, you see, I've just begun reading a book by my friend Rabbi Jonathan Sachs about the history of violence. And as I wrote in my book, which came out actually, 11 years ago now, What's Right with Islam, I talk about what I call the etiology or the origins of conflict. Conflict is not really endemic to religion. Conflict is endemic to the human condition. And conflict is seeded when two groups, two individuals, two parties, individuals or groups, that identify with a particular identification are fighting over a shared asset. That's the general fundamental formula that gives birth to any conflict. So two guys fighting over the love of a saved woman. They want the same asset. Two people fighting for the same inheritance. Two people fighting over something that is of value to them is the source of all conflict. Now, it can be packaged in any differentiating trait. It can be based upon gender, and you have gender wars. It can be based upon skin coloring. You have racial wars. It can be based upon tribal conflict. Then you have tribal wars, like in Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda. It can happen on the basis of religion, such as Muslims and Jews in let's say in the Middle East. It can be based upon sectarian differentiation, such as the Catholics and the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland, or the Sunni and Shia right now in Bahrain, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, and so forth, even in Iraq as well. So the differentiating thing, and people after a while think that the differentiating thing is the cause. And that's why you'll never solve conflicts that way. That's like saying the conflicts in Ireland between the Catholics and the Protestants had to do with the Catholic faith itself. It really has nothing to do with the differentiating trait. It's that trait is the basis on which one group of people or both groups feel that conflict is based on, and a whole philosophy, if you will, develops around the conflict. So men feel that women are fundamentally inferior. They have to be oppressed. They have to be kept in that corner. They have to be kept, barefoot and pregnant, or whatever the chauvinistic male approach is, and that's the reason for the conflict. Let's say, if it's blacks versus whites, if it's whatever it is, if it's Sunnis versus Shias, if it's Hindus versus Muslims in India. But if we look at religion as being the source, we're looking at the wrong source.
Right in the middle of a fascinating conversation on the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio, Imam Feisal Abdul Rauf is with us from New York, and he's going to be actually here in Missoula.
21st of October, speaking at the Doubletree, 7:30 to 9 o'clock.
Now, Imam Feisal, you began, before I interrupted with the break, I apologize for that, you began talking about the whole definition of conflict, and you began kind of working through it historically before I interrupted you. So please continue.
Well, as I wanted to point out that conflict, when it occurs within any two groups, is basically about those two groups fighting over something which they both value. All right, fighting over the same land, the same rights, the same belief, whatever it happens to be, and normally, mostly, it's always about something of economic value or power value. That's what people really fight to the death over. So if the issue of Catholics versus Protestants, let's say in Ireland, it's because the Irish Catholics felt they didn't have parity with the Protestants when it came to political power and economic power, opportunities, jobs, whatever. In the case of Jews and Muslims in Palestine, Israel, it's about the land, the contested territory, the same contested territory. And therefore, to solve the problem requires recognizing what it is that they're fighting over and addressing an equitable resolution of that issue. Now, what happens once the conflict is born, then people adopt whatever it is from that. They create a philosophy around it, and they use every concept of the religion to show that, oh, Jews and Muslims have been fighting from the time of Abraham's sons, Ishmael and Isaac, and Jews will create a theology around Arabs and Muslims create a theology around Jews, and the same thing between Sunnis and Shias, and that's the wrong part. That's the evil part, because no religion, no philosophy, actually preaches that you should treat another person in a negative way. Yes, people will critique people. I mean, men will critique women for the way they think. Women will critique men for their roughness and brutality and insensitivity. Catholics will critique Protestants for certain things and vice versa. But there's a difference between critiquing, because we even self-critique. But once the critique becomes the basis of conflict, then the conflict becomes self-perpetuating, and that is what happens.
So, Imam, what I hear coming through from this conversation is you're asking us to, in effect, strip away centuries of conditioning, that we frame our conflicts with them versus us in a different fashion than what you're describing, and as part of your initiative, what you're asking people to do is step back and hear this message that you're trying to deliver, which is stop thinking of it as Muslims versus Jews or Catholics versus Protestants, but to look at the deeper origins of what causes human conflict. Is that a fair assessment of what you're trying to convey?
Absolutely, because otherwise we're just spending a lot of time trying to educate ourselves on something which will not, as interesting as it is, will not help you solve the conflict.
I want to...
For example,
Go ahead,
when I came to the United States in the mid-'60s, there was this physicist, William Shockley, who actually believed that blacks were inferior to whites. The guy invented the transistors.
Right.
Okay? And, there are people who actually believe that. Now, of course, when you treat people and don't educate them and deny them rights, they will not be as developed as others. We all know this. And people who are, children who are kids of wealthy parents who can get the best education tend to do better, whereas people who are from broken families tend to do worse, even within the same ethnic grouping. So the notion that a group of people is fundamentally inferior to another is false.
I absolutely agree with you on that point, but I do feel that there are ideologies that are inferior to other ideologies, and religion brings with it a set of ideologies. And one of the things religion does is it reorganizes our Maslowian hierarchy of needs. You need water, you need food, you need shelter, but religion says you need God, and you need to do what God tells you to do. And most religions advise that you put God at the top of the pinnacle. And so we come to a position where one religion's God says to do something different than another religion's God, and that breeds strife and infighting. And this is my personal analysis. I'd love you to critique it because it's one that I've been struggling with. But it seems to me there is an advocacy in Muslim scripture for a caliphate, a real civic control system, an actual government on this earth that threatens much of what secular society has grown to know and love. And I'd like to hear your response to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the conflict happening within the Muslim world today. There are those who, in their desire for power and so forth, have been very clever in deploying issues of faith, because faith and religion is a very powerful lever to make people do something. People, and this is why religion has been deployed. But the fault lies not with religion. The fault lies with the human beings who are motivated by issues of power and deploy religion to get people to support them to do their bidding. The whole rise of ISIS, really, these are ex Saddam Hussein people who were the minority Sunnis in Iraq. They dominated over the majority Shia. They oppressed them. They were really nasty, cruel people. And they have learnt to deploy religion to help them recruit. If they had packaged themselves around the name, the movement for parity, economic parity and power parity for Iraqi Sunnis with Iraqi Shias, they wouldn't be able to recruit the way they have been able to recruit.
We're right in the middle of... go ahead, John.
Yeah, so you were responding to my my issue with the caliphate, and I guess I would like, because I do believe religions should be able to interpret themselves to the public, I think it would be good to hear from an imam. Does the scripture dictate a real-world caliphate, a physical governance on this earth, or not?
Well, here's what happened. I mean, we believe, as do devout Christians and devout Jews, any person who believes in a creator, that the creator created us and gave us certain commandments, the 10 commandments, from honoring parents, believing in God, and the do's and the don'ts. Thou shalt not kill, murder, commit adultery, steal, all those various things. Now, so we believe that a society has to govern themselves according to these principles, and most societies do. I mean, most societies throughout history, including those that call themselves secular, actually obey these 10 commandments. The whole issue really is how do we create a harmonious society in which different people with different belief sets can opt for different beliefs regarding the existential values, the nature of God and how we are going to relate to God, and yet have a common set of values in how they treat each other and deal with each other. So this is what any law is about, and Islam, like Judaism, is a religion of law. And we have developed, because the Prophet Muhammad was one of the few successors, others are Solomon and David, his father, who were prophets who also established, who were heads of governments, if you will, and commanders-in-chief and so forth. They established what you might call the essence of government. And for 14 centuries, or at least for 13 centuries, Islam developed a very sophisticated system of government where all kinds of varieties of different religious groups, thrived together. I mean, many people don't realize that until this recent last century, in Iraq, there were Christians who've been there since the time of Jesus Christ. There were Jews, there are Iraqi Jews, there are Iraqi Christians, there are Yazidis, there are Zoroastrians, varieties of faith traditions. So our theology, from its source, from its history, has always protected freedom of religion and religious diversity. It's only in the last century that this very vicious, pernicious, absolutist, authoritarian interpretation of Islam has gotten hold and has penetrated certain societies and taken hold of certain societies and removed the historical religious diversity that Muslim rule developed.
I guess my question then is what you're describing, is it truth? The extremely violent, where you said they're insisting on everyone become a Muslim or die, that sort of thing. Is that truth, or is that simply the misuse of political power using religion?
It is not. It is absolutely false, because the Quran is specific on saying that there shall be no compulsion in religion. It is specific in saying that God has created us, and He could have created us all to believe one way, but God deliberately created us in this way. And in fact, I have a book coming out in a couple of weeks. I wish that I had delayed or Palgrave Macmillan could have published this a couple of weeks earlier. It's coming out on the 28th, and I convened a group of Muslim scholars from various countries of the world, different schools of interpretation and law, asked them, how would you define the term Islamic State from our jurisprudence and our theology? And that's what the book is going to appear on the 28th of October. And they all unanimously said that a so-called Islamic State has to be just, primarily. It has to be just. And its purpose is to advance the divine intent of testing mankind and giving mankind the freedom, or humankind the freedom to choose what it wants to believe vis-a-vis God, and to treat each person according to the golden rule, which is to do unto others as you want others to do unto you.
Let me sum up what you said and make sure I got it right. I asked you if it called for, by it, the Muslim scriptures called for a civic caliphate, a governance on this earth. And what I understand is the answer is yes, but that caliphate doesn't look like what ISIS is trying to create.
Okay, here's one thing. The scholars said that the Quran, our religion, does not call for Muslims to establish a state.
Okay.
But human beings will always organize themselves according to a state.
Sure.
And what it says, when you rule over people, you have to rule with justice.
I agree, yeah. Well, but when we talk about the Ten Commandments, it's easy to gloss over the first four. Number 1, thou shalt have no gods before thee. Number 2, they shall make no graven images. Number 3, never take the Lord's name in vain. Number 4, uphold the Sabbath. I mean, if those 4 are very, very explicitly religious. So it's hard to put them into a civic form.
Well, you see, but still, I mean, look, our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution says we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, which is a very Abrahamic faith tradition. The Asian traditions believe in the caste system, endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. So we believe that the rights that we have are actually given to us by a Creator who is absolute. And among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which was changed from property.
Okay,
now, Muslim jurists, Muslim scholars of law said 7 centuries ago that all of our law, all of Islamic law, is to protect and further 6 fundamental meta objectives: life, human dignity, which I equate or map to liberty, and they map out what the pursuit of happiness is.
30 seconds. Go ahead. We have 30. We're out of time.
We're out of time. He's going to be here on the 21st of October at the Doubletree. Imam Feisal, we're looking so forward to your visit. Thank you so much for your time today. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Bob and John, and then all of you guys.
All right,
very much.
Thank you so much, Imam. All right, well, wow. All right, Emmett, I'm sorry we didn't get your call in. I apologize. You guys have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 6 for Montana Morning, all right?